Deep beneath the earth at Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists have just uncovered something that has sent shockwaves through the scientific community. It wasn't treasure and it wasn't a king's tomb. It was evidence of a dark practice that completely changes our understanding of this 12,000-year-old marvel.
The ancient pre-pottery Neolithic site of Göbekli Tepe, a site with origins going all the way back to 11,500 years ago.
For decades, we believed it was the world's first temple, built for worship. But this new terrifying discovery proves the people of Göbekli Tepe were doing more than just praying. They were involved in something much, much darker. The official story is about to be shattered. A timeline shattered. In the dusty plains of southeastern Turkey sits a hill that looks like any other. But underneath the soil lies a secret that completely rewrote the history of the world. The place is called Göbekli Tepe, and for decades it has been the single most confusing and important archaeological site on the planet. The thing nobody tells you is that this isn't just another ancient ruin. It's a place that simply should not exist. You see, for over a century, the story of civilization was simple. First, humans learned to farm around 10,000 years ago. Then they settled down in villages. After that, they built temples and created complex societies. But Göbekli Tepe flips that entire timeline on its head. The most shocking fact is its age. This place was built nearly 12,000 years ago. That is 6,000 years before Stonehenge and 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids of Giza. To put that in perspective, the distance in time between us and the Romans is shorter than the distance between the Romans and the builders of Göbekli Tepe. What makes this truly mind-bending is who built it.
In the shadows of the mountains of southern Turkey that humanity's first great construction project was born. The story of Göbekli Tepe
This massive complex of stone circles and gigantic pillars was constructed by hunter-gatherers. These were people who, according to our old history books, were supposed to be living in small nomadic groups, chasing animals and picking berries.
Woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers roamed the plains. This was a world without metal.
They weren't supposed to have the organization, the technology, or the social structure to create something on this scale. The pillars themselves are a massive wow factor. They are T-shaped, stand up to 19 feet tall, and weigh over 10 tons each. That is heavier than a modern-day school bus. Carving these from a limestone quarry and moving them hundreds of yards to the top of the hill would be a major challenge even today. These ancient people did it with nothing more than flint tools. For years, the man who discovered the site, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt, had a powerful theory. He called Göbekli Tepe the world's first temple. He believed it was a holy place, a pilgrimage site where different tribes of hunter-gatherers would come together for religious ceremonies. It was a beautiful idea that the need for community and a belief in something greater is what sparked civilization. But not all things are what they seem. Many people are crazy about this idea of a peaceful, spiritual beginning. However, recent discoveries have started to paint a very different and much more complicated picture. What many overlooked were the subtle clues that suggested this place was more than just a church in the wilderness. It was a living, breathing settlement, and the story of the people who live there is only now coming to light. The latest findings have left scientists scrambling for answers because they suggest the reality of Göbekli Tepe is far stranger and more unsettling than a simple temple. The peaceful story is crumbling fast. Secrets in the stone. For years, the story of Göbekli Tepe was set in stone, or so we thought. The official narrative was simple. It was a cathedral on a hill, a place for worship, not a place for living. But you see, that entire story has just been proven wrong. New excavations have revealed something that changes everything we thought we knew about this ancient marvel. The shocking truth is, Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple, it was a town. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, which can see structures buried deep underground, archaeologists have discovered that the famous stone circles are just one small part of a much larger complex. They found evidence of dozens of rectangular buildings, houses with stone walls and plastered floors. The thing nobody tells you is that these weren't temporary huts. These were permanent homes, complete with hearths for fires, grinding stones for processing grain, and even stone bowls and tools. This wasn't a place people visited, it was a place where people lived, worked, and raised families. One of the most incredible wow factors is the discovery of a massive rainwater collection system. Archaeologists found channels carved into the bedrock and huge underground cisterns capable of holding over 40,000 gallons of water. That is enough water to support a community of hundreds of people through the dry season. This level of planning and engineering is simply stunning for a society that supposedly hadn't even invented pottery yet. It proves they were thinking long-term, building a sustainable community on this hilltop. So what does this mean? It means that a complex, settled society existed thousands of years before the invention of agriculture as we know it. This is a huge deal. The old theory said that farming led to villages. Göbekli Tepe proves that it might have been the other way around. People gathered in large communities first, and then, out of necessity, they started experimenting with domesticating wild grains like einkorn wheat, remnants of which have been found all over the site. They were on the very cusp of the agricultural revolution, and this settlement was their laboratory. What many overlooked in the initial excitement about the giant pillars were the smaller, everyday objects. Thousands of animal bones have been found, mostly from gazelles, suggesting massive communal hunts were a regular event. They also found flint sickles for harvesting wild grasses and grinding slabs caked with the residue of ancient grains. This was a busy, thriving community. To put it mildly, the discovery of this settlement doesn't just add a new chapter to the story of Göbekli Tepe. It forces us to tear up the old book and start again. The people who lived here weren't just religious pilgrims, they were pioneers creating a new way of life. But living in humanity's first town wasn't all peaceful. The next layer of discoveries would reveal a much darker side to this ancient society, a side filled with bizarre art, unsettling rituals, and a strange obsession that points to something deeply troubling. The story of Göbekli Tepe was about to get much worse. Headless people. The idea of Göbekli Tepe as a bustling ancient town is incredible enough, but the deeper archaeologists dig, the more disturbing the picture becomes. The thing is, this wasn't just a place of community and innovation. It was a place of dark and mysterious rituals, with a focus on imagery that can only be described as unsettling. The art carved into the pillars and found around the site is not what you would expect from a peaceful society. It's a gallery of nightmares.
This was dressed with furs, and they were also painted. So you get the impression of this place as being...
Sure, there are carvings of animals like foxes, snakes, and boars, but there are also headless humans, giant spiders, and vultures. The most shocking fact is the recurring theme of decapitation. At a nearby site from the same time period, archaeologists found a statue of a human figure holding its own head. At Göbekli Tepe itself, they found fragments of 3 human skulls that had been intentionally carved with deep grooves and drilled with holes. This wasn't the result of some accident. This was a deliberate, ritualistic practice. Scientists now believe these people were part of a skull cult. This is a belief system where the heads of important ancestors, or perhaps even enemies, were preserved and used in ceremonies. You can see this everywhere in ancient cultures, but finding it this far back in time is staggering. The grooves on the skulls suggest they might have been suspended by ropes, perhaps displayed in the stone enclosures during ceremonies. One skull even had remnants of red ochre, a pigment used in ancient burials and rituals, suggesting it was painted for display. This discovery paints a much more sinister picture. The people of Göbekli Tepe weren't just worshipping animal spirits. They seem to have had a deep and macabre fascination with the human head as a symbol of power or the soul. This completely changes our view of them from simple hunter-gatherers to a society with a complex and frankly creepy set of beliefs about life and what comes after. And it gets even weirder. Recently, archaeologists unearthed something they had never seen before at the site. A nearly life-size statue of a wild boar painted with red, white, and black pigments. But the real stunner was found right next to it. Hidden in a bench carved into the stone was a statue of a human figure over 6 feet tall. To put it mildly, this was a jaw-dropping find. But the most unsettling part was its posture. The figure is clutching its own phallus, a symbol often associated with fertility or power. It wasn't standing in a place of honor, it was embedded within the structure, almost like a hidden guardian or a representation of a powerful primal force. What many overlooked is how these pieces fit together. The headless figures, the carved skulls, the animal predators, and these new powerful statues suggest a belief system centered on the violent cycles of nature. It wasn't about peaceful stargazing, it seems to have been about power, transformation, and confronting the harsh realities of their world. This wasn't a happy place. It was a place where people came to face their deepest fears. But what were they so afraid of? The answer may lie not on Earth, but in the sky above. The comet's shadow. Why would a civilization spend centuries building the most incredible structure on Earth, only to deliberately bury it? This is the final mind-bending mystery of Göbekli Tepe. The thing nobody tells you is that around 8000 BC, after more than 1,000 years of use, the people of this ancient city began the massive undertaking of burying their creation. They filled the stone circles with millions of cubic feet of dirt, rock, and animal bones, a task that would have taken generations. This wasn't an act of destruction, it was an act of preservation. But why? A new and controversial theory suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not just a temple or a town. It was a memorial, an observatory built to commemorate and track a cosmic catastrophe that nearly wiped out humanity. This idea centers on one of the most famous pillars, known as Pillar 43, or the Vulture Stone. Some researchers believe the carvings on this stone are not just random animals, but a star map. They claim it depicts a specific date, 10,950 BC. And what happened on that date? According to this theory, it was the day a comet broke apart and slammed into the Earth, an event known as the Younger Dryas impact. This cataclysm would have caused global earthquakes, mega tsunamis, and a sudden drastic drop in temperature, plunging the world into a mini ice age that lasted for over 1,000 years. The most shocking fact is that there is real geological evidence for such an event. From a layer of microscopic diamonds and melted rock found across North America and Europe that dates to this exact period. According to this theory, the people of Göbekli Tepe were the survivors of this catastrophe. The animal symbols on the pillars aren't just pictures, they're constellations. The vulture, they argue, represents Sagittarius, and the headless man represents a human casualty. The entire site was an astronomical clock built to track the fragments of this comet, known as the Torrid meteor stream, which our planet still passes through every year. The carvings were a warning, a message to future generations to watch the skies. So, is this true? Are we missing a key detail about our own past? People watching this are looking for answers, and the official story just doesn't add up. Think about it. We have a primitive society that suddenly appears with advanced knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and large-scale construction. They engage in dark, complex rituals centered around skulls. And then, after 1,000 years of building, they spend centuries burying their masterpiece as if to hide it or preserve it. How did this all happen overnight? Of course, it didn't. This knowledge must have come from somewhere. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have been the inheritors of a lost, even older civilization that was wiped out by the comet impact. Their entire culture, their religion, their monumental effort could have been a desperate attempt to preserve that lost knowledge and warn humanity never to forget the day the sky fell. The burial of the site might have been their final act, a time capsule for a distant future that they hoped would be ready to understand their terrifying message. The truth is far worse than a simple temple. It's a tombstone for a lost world. When giants walk the earth. So, we're left with a terrifying picture, a 12,000-year-old message carved in stone, warning us about a comet that nearly ended the world, a lost civilization, a skull cult, and a masterpiece intentionally buried for a future generation. Many people would stop there, content with a story that already shatters our understanding of the past. But the thing is, the comet theory, as mind-blowing as it is, might only be scratching the surface. There are other possibilities, wilder and even more unsettling theories that mainstream science is terrified to touch. These ideas dig into the very fabric of who we are and what might have come before us. The first, and perhaps most shocking theory starts with the pillars themselves. We see them as T-shaped stones, stylized human figures without faces. But what if they aren't stylized at all? What if they are realistic portraits of the builders? The largest pillars weigh over 10 tons and stand nearly 19 feet tall. What kind of being could handle such massive stones with ease? You can see this everywhere in ancient mythologies across the globe, from the Bible to the legends of the Greeks and the Norse. They all speak of an age when giants walked the earth. Many people are crazy about this idea, but what if it's not just a story? Think about it. The official story asks us to believe that small bands of hunter-gatherers with an average height of just over 5 feet organized themselves to quarry, carve, and move these behemoths using nothing but flint tools and rope. The logistics are a nightmare. But if the builders were, say, 12 to 15 feet tall, the entire process becomes drastically simpler. A 10-ton pillar would feel more like a large log. The lack of complex machinery suddenly makes sense because their own bodies were the machines. The T-shaped pillars with their long, slender bodies and arms outstretched might be a literal depiction of this lost race. The terrifying part isn't that giants existed, it's the implication that our own human history is not the only history on this planet. We might just be the civilization that came after, living amongst the ruins of something far grander and more powerful. But let's say the builders were human, just like us. That brings us to an even stranger theory. How did they achieve such impossible precision? What many overlooked are the tool marks, or rather, the lack of them. The stones are cut with razor-sharp edges and drilled with perfectly circular holes that show no signs of the wobble or chipping you would get from primitive tools. This has led some researchers to explore a truly wild idea. What if they weren't using physical tools at all? What if they were using sound? It sounds like science fiction, but the concept of acoustic levitation and sonic drilling is real. Modern science has shown that sound waves at the right frequency can cause objects to float and can even be focused to cut through hard materials. The thing nobody tells you is that ancient legends are filled with stories of this lost technology. Tibetan monks were said to have levitated massive stones using giant horns and chanting. The walls of Jericho in the Bible were said to have fallen to the sound of trumpets. What if these aren't just myths, but faded memories of a forgotten science? If the builders of Göbekli Tepe had mastered the science of vibration and frequency, the entire site becomes possible. They could have softened the limestone with resonant frequencies, allowing them to mold and cut it with incredible ease. They could have used focused sound to levitate the massive pillars into place, explaining how they were set so perfectly upright. This would mean that 12,000 years ago, a group of so-called primitive people had a mastery of physics that we are only just beginning to rediscover. The most shocking fact is that this knowledge seems to have been completely erased from history. Was it lost in the Great Cataclysm, or was it deliberately hidden? This leads us to the final and perhaps most profound possibility. Göbekli Tepe does not exist in a vacuum. Thousands of miles away, across oceans, are other impossible ancient structures. The megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the giant stone platforms of Baalbek in Lebanon, and even the underwater ruins off the coast of Japan. All these sites share a similar fingerprint. Massive, perfectly fitted stones that defy conventional explanation. What if they aren't the work of separate, isolated cultures? What if they are all outposts of a single, global, prehistoric civilization? Imagine a society that existed during the last ice age, a maritime civilization with a deep understanding of astronomy, engineering, and the Earth's natural energies. A civilization that could navigate the globe and build massive monuments on every continent. Many people have given this lost civilization a name: Atlantis. For centuries, Atlantis has been dismissed as a myth. But what if Göbekli Tepe is the first real, physical proof that such a world existed? Its incredible age, placed right before the end of the last ice age and the Younger Dryas cataclysm, fits the timeline perfectly. So, is this true? Is our entire recorded history just a short chapter at the end of a much longer, more spectacular story? Are we missing a key detail about our own origins? The builders of Göbekli Tepe, whether they were giants, sonic engineers, or the survivors of a lost golden age, left us a message. They buried their world, creating a time capsule of stone and stars, hoping that one day we would be ready to understand. The terrifying truth might be that their world ended in a global catastrophe, and our modern civilization is just as fragile. We think we are the peak of human achievement, but we might just be a society with amnesia, slowly waking up to the ruins of our own forgotten past. Nancy Schnabel's final truth shattered decades of silence, reshaping the gold rush forever. Her legacy makes us ask, what other incredible secrets lie hidden, waiting for a brave soul to reveal them? If this story fascinated you, please like and subscribe for more amazing tales.